Got some good work in there with our sub interfaces and also the frame relay interface delcy command, a very important command for your work and for your exam. Just to quickly recap, we have 3 ways to circumvent that split horizon rule. Create a logical full mesh. We know that's not terribly scalable. We talked about and then saw disabling split horizon at the interface level with no IP split. We know that while that may give you the result you want, it may also give you some results you don't want. And you can use sub interfaces, which is what we did in this last lab, and it worked out real well for us. And you can use either point-to-point or multi-point sub interfaces. Generally, you're going to use the last method, but it's always a good idea to know more than one way to do things in Cisco land. Now, let's talk about those multi-point sub interfaces for a minute, because I can already hear someone sending a question. Can you tell me exactly when I always use multi-point interfaces and when I always use point-to-point interfaces? And actually, I can't. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to that question. Depends on your network. Depends on your network, depends on your topology, depends on how many routers or how many endpoints you need on a sub-interface, that kind of thing. But had I chosen to use multi-point sub-interfaces, so named because I can reach more than one endpoint with them, as opposed to point-to-points, which only have one other endpoint, I would have configured them with the exact same command that I used with physical interfaces, frame relay map. And I've got one right here on the board for you, and the frame map statement, we know the syntax of that by now, and it's exactly the same. Again, there is no perfect answer to the question, to the theoretical question, when do I use multipoint, when do I use point-to-point, because it depends on a lot of factors. But if you have a sub-interface and it's got to reach more than one endpoint, you know what you got to do. You got to use a multi-point one. So let's go ahead and head for the next screen here and talk about a couple of new friends here. Frame relay congestion notification techniques with bonus acronyms. Frame relay uses 2 different values to indicate congestion, FECN and BECN. Forward explicit congestion notification and backward explicit congestion notification. Now you see why we're so happy we have acronyms for these. And as you can guess by the names, the main difference between the two is the direction. The frame cloud we know has multiple frame switches in it, but here I've got one in this drawing for you. If that switch encounters transmission delays due to network congestion, it's going to set the FECN bit on the frames headed for router B, because that's the direction the frames are traveling in. And router B sees that FECN bit set and says, okay, we got some congestion, I need to take the appropriate steps for that. And the BECN bit will be set on frames sent back to router A. So that's the opposite direction, or the backward direction in which the frames were originally going. And the switch is just letting router A know, hey, we've got some congestion in here, maybe you need to slow down a little bit, maybe you need to take some action there. Now, again, when a frame arrives at a router with the FECN bit set, that means congestion was encountered in the direction in which the frame was traveling. When a frame arrives at a router with the BECN bit set, congestion was encountered in the opposite direction in which the frame was traveling. When we get into quality of service, which we don't do in this course, but you'll definitely see it in future studies, and with our voice and video traffic, so much delay sensitive traffic out there today, we're really trying to use as much QoS out there as we can. One way you indicate when to drop frames is, is the BECN bit set, is the FECN bit set, that kind of thing. They're indicators of congestion and that we may want to take some action. A third congestion notification bit that ties into that neatly is the discard eligible bit, the dreaded DE. And the reason I say dreaded is that frames are going to sometimes be dropped as a result of congestion, and those poor suckers with the DE bit set, they're the first ones gone. Basically, when the DE bit is set on a frame, we are saying this data is the least important of all, so when you need to drop something, drop the frames with the DE bit set first. And then those frames go to a psychiatrist later on because they got the feelings hurt, but that's another course. You can see those values with show frame PVC, and I've got it on the board here for you. But let me pop up here for a moment and just run show frame PVC for you. And this is one we actually hadn't seen yet. And I like to save this one for last because it is really a great command. And it's going to tell you, how many active, inactive, and deleted ones you have. Inactive and deleted kind of almost sound the same thing, as if you delete something, it's definitely inactive. So we need to talk about that. but it's also going to give you per DELSI information on how many packets have come in, how many have gone out, how many bytes have gone in and out, how many dropped packets there have been. And you'll notice here, here are your in FECN packets, your in BECN packets, and your outs, etc. So you can always see that information with this command as well. It also tells you, and I do love this, it tells you when the PVC was actually created and the last time the status changed. We really like that. That helps with our detective work. So again, this is a very handy command, show frame PVC. Now let's see what's up next here. One of my favorite discussions. It's your fault or possibly yours, but it sure ain't mine. It does take me back to a job where I had to do a lot of telephone work. This site, was a hub and spoke network, and I was in charge of the hub and the spokes, but you can only be one place at one time. And there were a lot of iffy connections with this network up in some of the mountain areas. Sometimes that's just the way it is. And some of the more interesting discussions you'll have is, say, with a phone guy on the other end of the phone at 4:45 on Friday afternoon when you know darn well he wants to go home, and I certainly couldn't go anywhere until this connection was back up, and you have this big argument about the demarc point. At what point my company's responsibility ended and his began, and of course, he always seemed to think the fault was on our side of the demarc point. So this is one of those things that does help you track down where the problem is. We saw in show frame PVC just a moment ago the 3 status messages: active, inactive, deleted. Now active, that sounds pretty good, and usually it is. You're going to see one time in this entire course when active is not good. That's a teaser, but this ain't it. So we've got 2 active PVCs there, and that's actually good. That's what we want. But what is exactly the difference between inactive and deleted? And what I did here on the board, I closed router 3's serial interface and then went back to router 1. And notice which number came up. Inactive went from 0 to 1. PVC status inactive, etc. Well, the DELSI on R3 has gone inactive because there's a problem on R3. We shut it down. Deleted, on the other hand, means the PVC is not locally present. So this is how I've always kept these two straight. Inactive means it's the other guy's fault. The problem is remote. Deleted means it's your fault, and you might not have deleted it, but it does mean the problem is local. So that's kind of a demarc point argument. Inactive means there is a problem, but it's remote. You're not on the router with the problem. Deleted means you are on the PVC. You are on the router that is with the problem. That unbelievably sums up WANs and frame relay and PPP and CHAP and HDLC and everything else you could think of. A lot of really good labs here and a lot of great information for you to soak up for the exam. So go through them as many times as you need to, because that's the joy of this course. You don't get charged one more dime for watching them one more time. I will see you in the next section.